and you're given, thousands of dollars in student loans that you can't declare bankruptcy and get it off your record. You may not even graduate, so you don't even necessarily have the letters at the end of your name to make sure that you're getting a decent job. And then on top of that, you also get these credit cards. And at no point during that whole process does anyone sit you down and say, hey, this is what can happen if you don't pay this off. Hey, these are the things you should and shouldn't use your credit card for.
Welcome, everybody, back to another exciting show of the About That Water podcast. I have a special guest by the name of Clifton D. Corbin, who is an MBA, PMP, was a business consultant with over 2 decades of experience when he left his job and became a full-time stay-at-home dad. During this time, he also co-launched a Tapvigo, a touchless content delivery solution that brings digital content to the physical world. He has also authored his first book focusing on providing parents with the skills and tools to teach financial literacy to their children. Clifton graduated from Niagara University with a master's degree in business administration. He has spent years studying finance and is a passionate advocate for advancing the financial literacy of children and young adults. When not reading or listening to the podcast of Financial Economics, he can be found fixing up his 100-plus-year-old Toronto home, playing basketball with his kids, chairing a PTA meeting, or DJing in the basement. How you doing today?
I'm good, Anthony. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it.
Can you just go on and dive right into what got you passionate about talking to parents about teaching their kids financial literacy?
Sure. So it all comes from my story. So I was a money curious kid growing up. Couldn't learn enough about money and figuring out how money works and all the rest. And I was lucky. I had 2 parents who were willing to talk to me about money. But somehow I went off to university. I still made a mess of my finances. Got the credit card, went deep into debt. The typical story that we always hear. And after getting myself out of debt, I look back and I asked myself, well, what happened there? Why was someone who was, money curious and also had parents who were willing to talk about money still make so many mistakes with my money? And I came to the conclusion that as much as my parents were willing to talk to me about money, they didn't have all the pieces to provide me. So they gave me, the skills of how to earn and how to save, but we never got into debt. We never got into investing. We never talked about wealth creation and why that's so necessary. So my goal has always been to help children avoid the mistakes that I made. But as a parent myself, I really wanted to help parents give the rest of the message that I didn't receive to their kids. So that's kind of what brought me to this. It's an effort of mine to try to help the next generation, get a leg up and get a little further ahead than maybe we did.
Right. Yeah. Because are you the first person to go in your immediate family to go to university?
Luckily, no. So both my parents are university graduates. My dad is a lifelong learner. He's in his 70s now, and he just went back to school to get his PhD. So education is huge in my family. I have an older sister. She's got a similar educational background. She, undergrad, master's. I think she has 2 undergrads, potentially 2 masters. I'm not sure, but she's also education's always been so critical to us. But when you think about what happens when you go off to school, you learn skills to work, but you don't necessarily learn the skills to live, right? We're not learning life skills in school, unfortunately. So until that happens, until schools, focus more on providing those financial literacy skills to make sure that we know how to manage our money effectively and efficiently, to maximize our dollars and to gain wealth, etc. I took it upon myself to help, prepare kids and give parents those skills and those tools.
Nice. So what is the number one thing, or at least give us the top 3 things that a parent should have in their toolbox to teach their kids?
Well, the thing is, I feel like parents already have all of these things. I'm hoping I can help highlight them and help them, do them either more or maybe better. But the things that I encourage the most is giving children an opportunity to practice using money and practicing good money habits while they're at home. So if you can provide your child with an allowance to give them a chance to, save, spend, transact, even invest, etc., that's a great opportunity. So giving them opportunities to practice. But one of the things I try to encourage parents to do the most is just make the subject of money something that is discussed. So make sure that you're talking about it so that your kids know how you're using your money, how you're earning your money, how you're budgeting your money. Do you have a emergency fund? Are you investing? How do you protect your home against, accidents, etc.? So do you have an insurance policy, and what type of insurance policies you have? So I'm trying to encourage parents to make the subject of money an open subject that they talk about, but more holistically than just talking about, you need to go to school, you need to earn a living, and then, the rest you figure out on your own. So I want it to be a more fulsome, holistic conversation. But what I don't want is it to become this thing that's separate from everyday life. Like, I want you to take those natural moments that come up in every day and just use those moments, because parents are busy. Like, we don't have extra time. It's just not something that we have. So it's important that we just use those moments that come up naturally. So, if you happen to be bringing your kids to the grocery store, or you're walking down the street and you see a price tag, or you see a for sale sign, or what have you, it's an opportunity for a dialogue to talk about, needs versus wants, or, supply versus demand, or what have you. But there's so many opportunities, and our kids they're sponges. They just pick up all of this information. So take advantage of that natural curiosity that they already have, and exploit it for the good, and let them understand what's happening in this world, so that once they're out of the house, they have those skills so that they can manage their money in a more efficient way. So my top, one or two things is giving them opportunities to practice, making money a conversation that happens consistently and just naturally. So those are my top two things. If I had to think of a third thing, it's bringing them into your budget, like bringing them into the conversations that you're having around money with your partner or your spouse or whoever, and just letting them see what you're doing so that you can also model good behavior. So it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see it happening. So if you can have your child see what's happening, I think that's another powerful way for them to learn.
Now, usually, because, coming up on the holiday season, and, kids was like, yeah, I want this and I want that. And, I want to get you this, but they pile everything inside the grocery cart, and they looking at you like, hey, you showing up to the counter with 5 or 6 other items. Do you then ask them, well, how are you going to pay for that? Like, what would you do in that situation?
So that's a budgeting conversation, right? So you're getting a chance to talk to your child in that moment, or hopefully, I've said it a few times, like at the checkout line, especially if you've got young kids, it's probably not the best time to have these conversations, because they want it now. But if you have, and this is why I say, if you could talk about it often, and in those other moments where, the demand might not be so high on you and on them for something, but you can talk about how you manage a budget. And so one of the things I often say is that I really want parents to be intentional with what they say to their children, so that they get the full picture. So for example, sometimes you'll be in that frantic state where you're checking out at the grocery store, your kid's like, I want this, I want that, I want this. And you might just say, I don't have enough money for that. Well, the truth of the matter is you might actually have enough money, but the accurate thing is more that, that's not a priority in your budget at that moment. But the messaging you're giving to your child by saying, we don't have money for that, it's not that, it's not a priority. It's that maybe money's tight, and now there's confusion, and that's not what you want. You want to be able to be very clear and explicit. So again, these are conversations you might not want to have at the checkout, but these are conversations you should be having with your child to talk about, how you prioritize your money, so they can understand how budgeting is done, and how you have to allot so much money for, your necessities, so much money for saving and investing, and hopefully there's so much money for, those things that you want and desire. So that again, I see those as opportunities. It's a chance to talk about how you budget and how you manage your money. Now, if you're talking about how or what you do for a child who has a bunch of things that they want to buy and they have their own money, but they can't afford all of the things that they want to buy, it's again another great situation where you could talk to them and say, hey, you want to buy all these things, but here are the prices. You might have to save up for this thing. You might have to buy that later. Now we're talking about delayed gratification. And again, that's a great subject. It's a great habit to reinforce, especially at a young age, because if we can master that delayed gratification at a young age, just imagine how further along our kids will be once they become adults.
So when did you start telling your kids about money?
As soon as they were young enough or old enough to understand what I was talking about. So again, it's all about being age appropriate, right? Like you need to go to where your child is. So, when my 4-year-old was talking to me about money, I wasn't talking to him about investing and insurance and all the rest. It was very basic at that time. We're talking about, money identification and maybe what we use money for. And at those early ages, we started doing some of the role playing of, playing grocery store, or playing restaurant in his bedroom or in my daughter's rooms, like it was really basic at those early ages. But it was as soon as they were, aware enough and conscious enough to understand that money is such a powerful tool, we started talking about it. But the thing is, it's like you start then, but you never really stop. Like at this point, my kids are a lot older now. Now we're talking more about some of those more advanced things. So my son has bought his first investment. He's 10. But we could talk about that. And now that, the markets have taken such a dive, I could talk to him about dollar cost averaging, because now it's a good opportunity to buy more. So it's about stacking the education on top of the education. You talk about it often, you talk about it in different ways, using different examples, but just make it part of your life so that your kids are getting that information when it's a safe time for them to get it, when they're at home with you.
Nice. Because in one of your chapters, you talk about you benefit when your kids know about money too. And I think that's actually pretty important because, I met you at FinCon and it was actually pretty cool to talk to people that already understand some of the basic terms around finances. So then we can start, all right, since we all have this base level of understanding, now we can start going further. Is there something that you thought or that you felt that was impactful for your family?
Well, yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. Like going to that conference where we met, it was, you're meeting your peers, like everyone's in a similar boat with you and they all have this same understanding. But yeah, I really believe that by talking about money, and like one of the things I talk very often about is how we're constantly trying to build these strong relationships with our children. Like we talk about how we want to have open lines of communication. We want our children to come to us if there's problems, if they're having issues at school, if there's bullying, whatever. There's so many reasons we need our kids to feel comfortable to come to talk to us, because we can't be there all of the time with them. So once we show that we're willing to talk to them about everything, including money, which can sometimes, for some families in some cultures, it can be a subject that's hard to bring up. It's hard to talk about. But if we can break that down and actually make it something that, our kids are comfortable talking to us about and we're comfortable talking to them about, it does strengthen the relationship. There is a benefit there. And I also say, sometimes parents are they're a little self-conscious. Maybe they're not where they want to be in their financial journey and they're not comfortable talking to their children about it. But there's two things I say. One, you know more than your children do. So telling them will help them. And the second thing is, you have an opportunity here. Again, it's an opportunity to learn and grow with them. So, bring them along on the journey as you get your finances sorted out. Again, in an age appropriate way. You don't want to, burden your kids with anxiety and depression or any of those things, but you could still show your growth and have them benefit from that. So there's so many benefits that come from making this part of your family's, just making it part of your family, just having it something that's open and having it something that's, it's not another barrier. You don't want to put up barriers in your communications with your kids. So I feel like there's many benefits, but yeah, just having more people knowing that you can talk to people about it. That's the other thing. Like if you're willing to talk to other people about your finances, like I'm happy to talk to you, Anthony, about mine, because it builds relationships. It does help to break down some of the stigmas. And I feel like money, because of the weight of it, it can bring a lot of, I know for me, when I was going through my financial troubles, it brought a lot of shame, it brought a lot of anxiety. And I know, had I been able to talk to more people about where I was, how I was feeling, if I was able to find folks like you and other people who are, focused on helping people journey to a better place or to the place they want to go, I know it would have helped me. So I encourage folks to, seek out resources like yourself, because it really does help knowing that you're not alone.
Right. And that's one of the things about this whole platform. It's about teaching people to build strong financial habits. And one of those habits that I like to encourage people is actually just open up your mouth and have that conversation. When you're down, don't matter who it is, you can talk to a brick wall or talk to a sock puppet, but just kind of get that, build that habit up of actually open up the conversation to say, hey, you know what, this is where I'm at and I'm not happy. So I need to create habits to take me out of this realm. And you talked about some of those financial traumas, but if it's okay that you can kind of tap into one of the financial traumas that you had before we move on to the third segment.
Yeah, no. So like I said, my mission comes directly from what happened to me when I went away to university. Like when I say I made a mess of my finances, like that's not hyperbole. Like that's very true. Like my credit score was, in the low 400s. I maxed out multiple credit cards. They were in collections. I mentioned it in my book. There was a time after I graduated where I started working, and this is not a legal practice, and I didn't know it at the time. But one of the collection agencies who had one of my accounts started calling me at work and threatening to tell my employer that I was in this situation. So I'm at work trying to get myself out of this debt hole that I've put myself in, being hounded by a collection agent while I'm telling them, like, you're jeopardizing my ability to pay this bill by having me. And then the worst part is I was working in a call center, so I had to take the call. It's not even like I could ignore the call. My job is to be on the phone. So if a call comes in for me, I have to take it. So like, it was terrible. It was terrible. But the good thing is, and I feel very lucky in that I'm a person who usually recognizes, like, I'm in a place, but that isn't the end. This is where I am right now. So I struggled hard, but I worked my way out of it. And I was able to get on solid footing. And then I've taken those moments and tried to use those to, again, bring awareness to the fact that you can avoid that altogether. And if you haven't avoided it, if you're in it, you can get out of it. But yeah, those were not good times.
So what habit that you use to get out of that situation?
It might seem like an obvious thing to say. I became very conscious and aware of not just my spending, but my money in general. So what brought me to that space was I chose to ignore what was happening. I chose to see bills come in and not address them. I could have avoided some of that if I would have, reached out to the credit card companies and said, hey, listen, this is what's happening. Like, I could have, at any point during that decline, I could have put a stop to it and said, I'm stopping here and I'm going to start moving forward. But I waited until the point I did. But at that point, I became very conscious and aware of what I was doing with my money. I made sure that so true story, the first credit card that I paid off, I worked and I paid the credit card. I worked and I paid the credit card. And I paid off the credit card bill, even though it was in collections, I paid it off, it was fine. But the thing that I felt after that was the same. So the habit that I think was probably the most beneficial was the second credit card bill that I worked to pay off. I started to save at that point as well. So at that point, I started doing, well, even though I know it's going to take me longer to pay off this bill, I don't like the fact that I just worked for X amount of months and days and what have you, and I have zero to show for it. Yes, my credit card bill's paid off, but I still feel like I'm in debt. I don't really have anything. So it was at that point when I started to recognize and start putting some of the practices of, paying yourself first into practice, which is, it seems so basic to say pay yourself first and save, before you spend. It always seems like this thing that people like, it just seems too basic to make a difference, but it's so monumental to master your money. It's, if you don't prioritize yourself, your saving and your investing before you prioritize your bills and your wants, you will always find yourself at zero. So if I had to say, it was focusing on my money and just being very aware of where I was and what I was spending my money on and what I was doing. And then the second thing was making sure that I was truly saving, being the first person who got paid when I got a paycheck. So putting some money aside into a savings account, into a retirement account, wherever you feel like you need to put that money, so that when my second credit card bill was paid, I was like, okay, my bill is paid. I've got money in the bank. I'm building an emergency fund. This isn't going to happen again. And I started to grow from there. Now, I say all that, and I will fully admit, like, my money has never been mastered. I still have challenges. There's still times where, I find myself dipping into my emergency fund when I probably should have been able to budget for the things that I'm using my emergency fund for. But my emergency fund is there. And as soon as I dip into it, I refund it, and I'm back to a place where I have a buffer. So I say all this with the caveat of, like, I'm still working on it. I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, I've got a family of 4. We've got a lot of competing priorities. And I'm a stay-at-home dad, so we don't have that many resources as far as money coming into the house. But we make it work because I still focus on where our money's going. I still budget. I still make sure the money that comes in, part of it is going into saving and investing. So those same habits and practices that I picked up in my early 20s are still things that I'm working on that are still helping me get ahead now, with that caveat that, it's a journey. It's not an end.
Yeah, that is so key. Because I think no matter where you go, everybody has to budget. And that's one of the things that, not really budget, I would just say manage cash flow management. Let's call it that. Yeah. So as we understand our cash flow and understand where our finances and our expenses are, it helps us to fully understand where you really want to be. So now that brings up the next question in the third segment, which is talking about your future. What is the most exciting for you that you see in your future coming up?
So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now, which is advocating for financial literacy. And I'm working on finding different routes to do that. So the most exciting thing for me is the different projects I'm doing to help advocate for financial literacy. Just if I could do a humble brag. So in addition to the book that I have, I've got another book coming out in the next little while. I'm sure you've probably heard of The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes, I do have a copy.
Right. Of course, everyone in this space knows this book. Yes. I tried reading it to my son because, like I said, I'm so focused on this. I got into the first couple pages of it and I realized I couldn't read it to him. Like, it was written in 1926. It's not written for someone to read now. And then I looked it up and I was like, a book written in 1926 is now considered public domain, which means you can do whatever you want with it. So between my son and I, we've rewritten it. The copyright has run its course and it's now available to the public. So you could just, do whatever. So I rewrote it with my son as my sounding board to make sure that it was very easy to read. So I would read a couple, chapter or sentences to him and get to the end of a chapter. I'm like, do you understand what this is saying? And if he said, I don't understand it, I'd go back, I'd rewrite it until it was something that he could understand. And so that it was something that a 10-year-old would be able to understand. So I've tried to make it a very inclusive, easier to read book for a modern audience. So I'm going to be releasing that in the next couple of months. And I've got a couple other projects I'm working on, again, really focusing on helping other folks get a better understanding of finance and why mastering their own money will help set them up for, financial independence and just having that comfort. Because I know from personal experience, when I didn't feel like my money was under control, it led to a lot of chaos in my life. So I'm trying to help other folks feel more comfortable about that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear about your stories and the chaos and so forth. But obviously, that's going to be a whole nother show. Because it's funny that you mentioned the public domain side of the house. Because I got an email. I'm actually on Dave Ramsey's email list because I purchased a book from their platform.
Sure.
And so Dave Ramsey also came up with a foreword to The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yeah.
So you're just gonna put your name on the front and charge people $15 for it?
I'm not doing it. So that's the thing. So I truly love that book. Like, that book was, as much as I read it in my early teens, and obviously it gave me the tools. I feel very much like the one of the characters in the book who got all of the lessons, applied none of them, and then went back and was like, oh yeah, this is what I should have been doing. So I very much it's one of my favorite books. I know a lot of people in this space, it's one of their favorite books, and I really want to make it something that's accessible for another generation. Like I said, I tried reading it too. Like, I could read it, I don't mind. It's got some dated language, and every character is a male, and it's fine. I could read it, but it's not accessible. It doesn't have the inclusiveness that I think is necessary to pull, a female reader who doesn't see themselves in that book. There's just, I wanted it to be something that was very accessible. And yes, I know a lot of people, because it's now in the public domain, a lot of people have taken it, put a forward on it, changed the cover, maybe did a bit of editing, what have you, and just re-released it and said, here, just get this version. I wanted to make it something fresh and new and exciting. So that's one of my big passions, and especially since I was able to do it with my son, I'm super excited about this one.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes once that becomes available.
I'll let you know.
And also, I definitely might be picking up a copy.
Oh, you'll get a copy.
But, yeah, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get a copy. How about that? I'm gonna say you heard it here first, folks. I'm gonna get me a copy. All right. So you ready for the final 4 questions?
Hit me.
Alrighty. So, number 1, what does wealth mean to you?
Choice. Mm-hmm. If you have wealth, if you've got money in the bank, you've got an opportunity to choose what you do next. You don't depending on how much wealth you have, you get to choose whether you stay in this job that you like or stay in this job you don't like. You get the opportunity to have more choice. So wealth for me gives you choice and flexibility and options.
All right. Number 2, what was your worst money mistake?
Not managing my credit cards when I was in college. I think that one's pretty obvious. You saw that one coming.
Yes. By the way, do you know what credit card was that?
Oh gosh, I had 2. One was a Visa, one was a MasterCard. They were from bigger banks up here, and I actually have a copy of one of the first credit scores that I pulled after I started paying off my debt, and it's a laundry list of just missed payments, and this, like, the number is sad. That was one of those projects that just took forever, is trying to get my credit score back up. And working to make sure that all the information in my credit report was right. So I would pay off a bill, but it would take a while for it to hit on my credit report. So it would take a while for it to hit on my credit score. But I was able to watch as my credit score slowly climbed up out of the darkness. And then just with the passage of time as well, some of those things will just fall off. So that helps as well. But that's 2. One was a Visa, one was a MasterCard, because I think I got one when I knew I couldn't use the other one. Just terrible money management.
I'm laughing because I was there too.
Yeah, no, I like I say, it's a story that we hear too often, and I say, like, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so focused on parents and kids, is because, as a young adult, as a 18, 19, maybe even 17-year-old, you can go off to college and university and you're given, thousands of dollars in student loans that, you can't declare bankruptcy and get it off your record. You may not even graduate, so you don't even necessarily have the letters at the end of your name to make sure that you're getting a decent job. And then on top of that, you also get these credit cards. And at no point during that whole process does anyone sit you down and say, hey, this is what can happen if you don't pay this off. Hey, these are the things you should and shouldn't use your credit card for. Going out and buying I'm going to date myself, but going out and buying the last Tribe Called Quest album, that's not what you need to spend your money on this credit card for. Like, that is for an emergency. And an emergency isn't, the album's dropping today and I don't have any cash. The emergency is, something that's legitimately an emergency. So it's my mission is to let parents and children know, you need to manage this. You need to understand this. You need to know why you have a credit card. A credit card is really a short-term loan. And if you're using it as money, then you're using it incorrectly. You need to think of it as a loan. You're borrowing money from your credit card company and you're buying something. And if you don't pay back that loan, you are going to end up paying ridiculous amounts for something you might have been able to pay in cash for. And again, the long-term repercussions, whether that be, you won't be able to finance a vehicle. You won't be able to potentially get your own home. Some employers use credit scores to judge whether they should hire you or not. So there's so many repercussions. So I don't just focus on debt. I really want to focus on the whole picture. But since you're asking, what was my thing, I gotta focus on the debt.
Nice. All right. So number 3, what is your favorite financial or non-financial book?
All right. I have to go with Richest Man in Babylon for my favorite financial book. And if I had to go with my favorite non-financial book, it is Sapien. I know you give me an either or, but Sapien is just a phenomenal book. I don't know if you've checked it out, but it really does help to change, or at least it helped me change a bit of my perception of, man-made constructs and how this whole world works. It was just a phenomenal book.
Nice. And the number 4 question is, what is your favorite dish to make?
So this was that's a hard question for me to answer because I'm a cooker. I love to cook. I will spend a whole day in the kitchen and be happy. But I've got to go back to my West Indian roots. My parents are both from Trinidad, so I'm going to say some curry chicken, curry shrimp, and maybe some basil shot.
Basil shot, yeah, that's really good. I had it when I went down for Carnival. That was fun.
When were you there?
2017.
Nice.
It's a good time.
Yeah, no, it's the best time. I'm reminiscing right now. No, it's good times.
So the final question that I always ask is, where could people find out more about you?
All right, so you could find me on you can go to my website. That's probably the best place to find me. You can read my blog there. So my website is cliftoncorbin.com. You can find me on Instagram under Your Kids Their Money. You can find me on Twitter, again, Your Kids Their Money. But yeah, the easiest way to find me, just jump on my website and you can get everything you need from me there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Clifton. For those of you who are listening, I want to make sure that if you found this important or found some information in this that somebody else could actually benefit from, please make sure you share this for yourself. If you thought this was actually an awesome interview, please go ahead on and and don't forget to subscribe. It does help people find me and also find more people like Clifton. So we can actually start sharing the financial literacy across the spectrum of ages, talking from parents to kids. And again, thank you so much, Clifton, for being on the show today. Yeah.
Anthony, before I let you go, I need to thank you so much for not just having me on, but for creating a platform, for using a platform to further people on their financial journey. Like, what you're doing is so critical. It's so important. It's so necessary. And I know I know you've got probably great aspirations to hit, so many followers, but you're making impact on individual lives over and over and over again. And the value of that can't be measured in a like. It can't be measured in a subscribe. Please like and subscribe. But I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing. It's so necessary. So I'm grateful to you. And I just wanted to make sure I give you your flowers.
Oh, thank you so much, Clifton. I would greatly appreciate you for everything you do. Thanks. Clifton even graduated from Niagara University with a master's degree in business administration. So
Niagara University. I wish I went to Nigeria. I was up in New York. It was just a hop, skip, and a jump from here. But I wish I was in Nigeria.
All right, let me try that again. I'm sorry.
No worries, man.
This is why it's recorded.